They burned his house down. They threatened his daughter. They laughed at him in that courtroom. But what they didn't know was that the old janitor holding that mop had a secret that would bring their billion-dollar empire crashing down. This is the true story of how one invisible man defeated the most powerful people in America. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll never look at the person cleaning your office the same way again. His name was James Wilson, and 3 words from his mouth changed everything. I will defend him. What happened next will restore your faith in justice, or break your heart trying. Stay with me. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Let me tell you a story that will restore your faith in the power of one person standing up for what's right. Picture this, a hot summer morning in Chicago. Inside the Grand Federal Courthouse on Dearborn Street, something extraordinary was about to happen. Something that would shake the foundations of power and remind us all that heroes don't always wear expensive suits. His name was James Wilson. He was 67 years old, with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen too much injustice in this world. Every morning at 5 o'clock, James put on his navy blue uniform with maintenance stitched across the pocket. He mopped floors. He cleaned windows. He emptied trash cans. For 28 years, he'd been invisible to the lawyers and judges who walked these halls. But James Wilson held a secret. Tucked away in his wallet, behind a faded photo of his late wife, was a license to practice law. Yes, this humble janitor was once one of the most promising attorneys in Chicago. But that was a lifetime ago, before powerful people decided he was too dangerous, before they destroyed his career and left him with nothing. On this particular morning, courtroom 405 was packed. Everyone had come to witness what the newspapers were calling the trial of the century. The man sitting alone at the defense table was Daniel Cooper, a 40-year-old real estate developer whose face had been on every magazine cover just months before. Daniel had built an empire creating affordable housing communities powered entirely by clean energy, a revolutionary system that could provide free electricity to millions of poor families. But now Daniel faced serious charges. They said he stole the technology. They said he was a fraud. His company, Green Haven Communities, was worth $8 billion. And now, powerful people wanted to take it all away. That morning, something shocking happened. Daniel's lawyers, a team of 6 attorneys who charged thousands of dollars per hour, simply didn't show up. No phone call. No explanation. Nothing. The judge, a stern woman named Margaret Foster, looked down at Daniel from her bench. "Mr. Cooper," she said coldly, "where is your legal team?" Daniel stood up, his hands shaking. "I don't know, Your Honor. They were here yesterday. I've been calling all morning, but no one answers." The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Christine Harris, smiled like a cat who'd caught a mouse. "Your Honor, it appears the defendant has been abandoned. We request an immediate judgment." Judge Foster nodded. "Without legal representation, I have no choice but to. I will defend him." The voice came from the back of the courtroom. Deep, strong, unshakable. Every head turned. There stood James Wilson, still holding his mop, his uniform damp with cleaning solution. He walked down the center aisle, his worn shoes squeaking on the polished marble floor. People whispered. Some laughed quietly. The prosecutor rolled her eyes. "Your Honor," James said, reaching the front of the courtroom, "I would like to represent Mr. Cooper." Christine Harris actually laughed out loud. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. The janitor wants to play lawyer." James's eyes hardened, but his voice stayed calm. "I'm not playing, Ms. Harris. I was a member of the Illinois Bar for 15 years. My license is still valid." He pulled out a worn card from his wallet. "I've kept up with every requirement, every year, just in case this moment came." The courtroom erupted in shocked whispers. Judge Foster examined the card, her face showing clear disapproval. "Mr. Wilson, you haven't practiced law in nearly 3 decades. This is highly unusual." "With respect, Your Honor," James replied, "this man deserves representation. The law guarantees that right." The judge turned to Daniel. "Mr. Cooper, do you want this janitor to represent you?" All eyes fell on Daniel Cooper. Here was a man who had everything money could buy. Now he was being offered help from a courthouse janitor. Daniel looked into James's eyes and saw something there: intelligence, determination, and a fire that money couldn't buy. "Yes, Your Honor," Daniel said firmly. "I accept Mr. Wilson as my attorney." Judge Foster sighed heavily. "Very well. You have 15 minutes to prepare." As James walked to the defense table, a security guard stepped in front of him. "Sir, only attorneys are allowed past this point." James showed his card again. "I am an attorney." The guard looked at the judge, who nodded reluctantly. He stepped aside with obvious reluctance. James sat down beside Daniel and leaned close. "Something isn't right here," he whispered. "Your lawyers didn't just abandon you. Someone made them disappear. This whole thing feels like a setup." Daniel looked shocked. "What makes you say that?" "I've cleaned these courtrooms for 20 years, James replied. "I've watched hundreds of cases. I know how justice is supposed to work. And this isn't it. Someone powerful wants you destroyed." When court resumed, Christine Harris stood up. "Your Honor, we have serious concerns about Mr. Wilson's ability to handle such a complex case." James rose immediately. "Your Honor, my qualifications are not the issue. The law doesn't require fancy offices or expensive suits to provide good representation. It requires knowledge, dedication, and a commitment to truth." Judge Foster's face tightened. "Mr. Wilson, in my courtroom, attorneys conduct themselves with proper decorum, the kind learned at prestigious law schools and respected firms." The racial undertone in her words was subtle but clear. James had heard such comments his entire life. But he didn't flinch. That evening, as people left the courthouse, Daniel thanked James quietly. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." James's answer was simple and powerful. "Because everyone deserves justice, Mr. Cooper. Rich or poor, black or white, everyone deserves someone who will fight for them." And so began a battle that would expose corruption, challenge power, and prove that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are the ones who change the world. The next morning, James drove his old pickup truck through the gates of Daniel Cooper's estate in the suburbs. The security guard looked at the rusty vehicle with suspicion. "I'm here to see Mr. Cooper," James said. The guard laughed. "Sure you are. Mr. Cooper's attorneys drive Mercedes and BMWs, not whatever this is." "Just call him, please," James said patiently. After a tense phone call, the gate finally opened. At the main house, James was made to wait outside in the heat for 20 minutes before being allowed in. These small humiliations were nothing new to him. Daniel met him in a large office filled with awards and certificates. "Sorry about the wait," he said, though his tone suggested this was normal. "We need to get to work," James said. "I only have today before I'm back on my shift at the courthouse." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You're still working as a janitor while defending me?" "I can't afford not to," James replied simply. "Now, show me everything related to your case." As they reviewed mountains of documents, James noticed something troubling. "These papers are incomplete. Your previous attorneys should have objected. And look here, these technical specifications about your energy system are heavily redacted. Did your lawyers do this?" Daniel leaned forward, suddenly alert. "No, those documents should be complete. That's the proof that I invented this technology myself." James's eyes narrowed. "Someone deliberately removed evidence. Your own attorneys were sabotaging your case from the inside." As they continued working, James grew quiet, lost in painful memories. Daniel noticed. "What is it?" James hesitated, then spoke. "Your situation reminds me of my past. I was a rising star at the biggest law firm in Chicago, the first black attorney they ever made partner." His voice carried old wounds. "Then I took on a discrimination case against Midwest Energy Corporation. They were major clients of the firm's board members." He paused, the bitterness clear in his voice. Evidence started disappearing. Witnesses changed their stories. Then suddenly, I was accused of tampering with evidence, something I would never do. I was disbarred for 6 years before I could prove my innocence. By then, no law firm would hire me. The janitor job was all I could get. Daniel absorbed this in silence, beginning to understand the man beside him. James moved to the window and adjusted the blinds casually. "There's a black car across the street. It's been there since I arrived." Daniel joined him. "Security. Not yours," James said. "They're watching this house. Someone is very interested in what we're doing." He turned to face Daniel. "Tell me about your technology. The real story." Daniel walked to a wall safe and pulled out a folder. "My energy system isn't just another solar panel or wind turbine. It's completely different." He spread out technical drawings. "I've created a way to harness geothermal energy at a fraction of the usual cost. It can provide free electricity to entire neighborhoods." "And that threatens someone?" James asked. "It threatens everyone making billions from traditional energy," Daniel explained. Power companies, oil corporations, politicians who receive donations from them. My technology could make their business model obsolete overnight. James whistled softly. That gives a lot of powerful people a reason to destroy you. Later, Daniel's executive assistant, Rebecca Shaw, entered without knocking. She was tall and efficient, and she barely glanced at James. Daniel, the board wants an emergency meeting about the trial. Her eyes dismissed James entirely. They're concerned about your unusual choice of representation. Tell them I'm busy, Daniel replied. Rebecca lingered. Are you certain this is wise? Perhaps we should consider settling. That won't be necessary, James interjected quietly. Rebecca's expression turned icy. I don't believe I was speaking to you. James Wilson, attorney at law, he said evenly. After she left, James asked, How long has she worked for you? 5 years. She's extremely loyal. Why do you ask? James didn't answer directly. Instead, he noticed a flash drive on Rebecca's desk in the next room. A quick look revealed company files being systematically copied. That afternoon, a courier delivered a package from the prosecution, new evidence they planned to introduce. Inside were emails supposedly showing Daniel discussing stealing the technology 2 years earlier. These are fake, Daniel said, his face pale. I never wrote these. James studied them carefully. They're well done, but there are inconsistencies. The question is, how did they get access to your email format and signature? Someone very close to you is helping them. He looked directly at Daniel. And they're not just trying to win a lawsuit. They want to destroy you completely. That evening, James visited his old mentor, Robert Hayes, now 89 years old. Robert had been a legendary civil rights attorney. In his home filled with old law books and faded photographs, Robert listened to James's story. When James finished, Robert removed his glasses slowly. This isn't just about your client's invention. What you're describing connects to something much bigger. He pulled out an old file. 30 years ago, I was investigating a group called the Alliance, corporations and politicians working together to suppress technologies that threaten their profits. He handed the file to James. I discovered evidence, but then my witnesses started dying in accidents. My office was burned down. A judge I'd never met called to warn me to stop. I was too old to fight. James opened the file and recognized several names connected to Daniel's case. Why would they reveal themselves over one man's invention? James asked. Because, Robert said gravely, free energy for the poor threatens everything they've built. We're talking about trillions of dollars and the power to control entire nations. They'll do anything to stop it. James left that meeting with a heavy heart but renewed determination. The conspiracy was real, vast, and dangerous. But he'd faced intimidation before. And this time, he wouldn't back down. The courtroom on the second day was packed with reporters and curious onlookers. Word had spread about the janitor defending a billionaire, and the media loved the story, though most of the coverage was mocking. From mop to motion, janitor's legal gamble, read one headline. Another asked, Can a courthouse cleaner clean up this case? James ignored the whispers and stares, focusing on his notes. The prosecution team entered like victorious generals, confident and smirking. Christine Harris called her first witness, Dr. Philip Bradford, a technology expert who claimed Daniel had stolen his designs at a conference. When Christine finished her questions, she turned to James with a patronizing smile. Your witness, Mr. Wilson. James approached the stand, immediately struggling with the courtroom's electronic display system. The court clerk made no move to help as lawyers in the gallery exchanged amused glances. Technical difficulties, Mr. Wilson? Judge Foster asked with thinly veiled impatience. Perhaps in complex cases, we need attorneys who can operate basic technology. Laughter rippled through the courtroom. James felt the familiar sting of disrespect, but he straightened his shoulders. My apologies, Your Honor. In my day, we focused on substance over presentation. He abandoned the technology and walked directly to the witness. Dr. Bradford, you testified that you saw Mr. Cooper photographing your prototypes at the Denver Innovation Summit, correct? Yes, that's correct. What date was this summit? July 8th through 10th, 2022. James handed a document to the clerk. I'd like to enter this evidence, Mr. Cooper's flight records and hotel receipts showing he was in Seattle from July 6th through July 12th of that year, attending a completely different conference. The witness shifted uncomfortably. I may have the dates confused. Your Honor, James interrupted, if this witness is mistaken about where this supposed theft occurred, what else is he wrong about? By the time James finished, he'd exposed multiple contradictions in the testimony. The jury watched with newfound respect as this janitor-turned-lawyer systematically dismantled the prosecution's witness. During lunch, James stepped outside for air. Two men in suits approached him. "Mr. Wilson," the taller one said, "you're making a mistake with this case." "Is that a threat?" James asked calmly. "Call it friendly advice. A man your age should be thinking about retirement, not making powerful enemies." James stood his ground. "I've faced worse than vague threats from men trying to scare me." The shorter man stepped closer. "Have you checked on your apartment lately? Would be unfortunate if something happened to it." They walked away, but James's hands were shaking. Not from fear, from anger. That evening, James returned to his small apartment in the South Side and found it had been ransacked. Nothing valuable was taken. He owned little of value. But his legal notes were scattered everywhere, and his old case files had been gone through. He called Daniel. "They broke into my home. They're trying to intimidate me." "Come stay here," Daniel said, genuinely worried. "I have plenty of room." "That wouldn't look proper," James replied. "But thank you." As they worked late into the night at Daniel's home, the two men began to truly see each other. Daniel talked about growing up poor, about his drive to help families like his own. James shared stories of the racism he'd faced throughout his career and life. "I never realized," Daniel said quietly, "how different your experience has been from mine." "Most people don't," James replied. "That's why these battles matter." The next morning brought devastating news. James's apartment building had caught fire during the night. The fire department said it was arson. Accelerant had been used. James's home was destroyed. Everything he owned, photographs of his late wife, mementos from his legal career, gone. Then James received a call from his daughter, Lauren. They hadn't spoken much in years. Their relationship had been strained after James's disbarment. "Dad, I saw you on the news," she said. "Are you really defending Daniel Cooper?" The sound of her voice made James's heart ache. "Yes, sweetheart, I am." "Why?" "After everything the system did to you." James chose his words carefully. "Because it's the right thing to do. And because this case is connected to what happened to me all those years ago." There was a long pause. "Be careful, Dad. Please. I can't lose you too." Her voice cracked, reminding him that she'd already lost her mother. "I will," he promised. But the attacks kept coming. The next day, Lauren called again, this time crying. "Dad, I just lost my job. My boss said it's not good for the company image to have someone connected to your case working there." James felt his heart break. His fight was now hurting his daughter. "I'm so sorry, Lauren." But his daughter surprised him. After a moment of silence, she said, "You know what? If they're coming after me too, I might as well help you." "What can I do?" Pride and guilt warred in James's chest. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure, Dad. It's time I stood up for something too." Meanwhile, James discovered something disturbing. Someone had been accessing records of his old legal cases, particularly the discrimination suit that had ended his career 30 years ago. They were digging up his past, looking for ways to discredit him. "They know exactly who I am," James told Daniel. "They know I'm dangerous to them because I've been through this before. And they'll use every weapon they have to stop us." But James had something they didn't expect. He had nothing left to lose. His career had already been destroyed once. His home was now ashes. His reputation had been mud for decades. And sometimes the person with nothing to lose is the most dangerous person in the room. "Let them come," James said quietly. "I'm not backing down. Not this time." James knew he needed help to uncover the full truth. His daughter Lauren had skills he didn't. She was brilliant with computers and social media. Together with an old friend named Patricia Moore, a digital forensics expert, they began digging deeper. What they found was staggering. "Dad, look at this," Lauren said one evening, her laptop screen glowing in the dim light. "All these companies are connected through shell corporations and shared board members." She'd created a visual map showing the relationships. Midwest Energy Corporation, the same company that had destroyed James's career 30 years ago. National Power Industries, Summit Oil, Atlas Defense Contractors. And at the center, connected to all of them, was the company accusing Daniel of theft. "It's all the same people," James said softly. "After all these years, it's the same people." Patricia had analyzed Daniel's stolen technology files. "James, do you understand what his energy system really does? It could provide free electricity to millions of people. Completely free. No monthly bills, no meter readers, no dependency on power companies. She pulled up financial projections. If this technology spreads, these energy corporations lose everything. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in annual revenue gone. The entire energy industry as we know it would collapse. James finally understood the full picture. This wasn't just about business competition. This was about survival for some of the world's most powerful companies. And they were willing to do anything, lie, cheat, intimidate, even kill, to stop Daniel's invention from reaching the public. Back in court, the prosecution brought in a witness named Dr. Simon Turner, a former employee of Daniel's company who claimed Daniel had stolen the technology from him. But James was ready. Through careful questioning, he exposed that Dr. Turner had been paid $300,000 to lie. He showed the jury bank records, recordings of conversations, and emails proving the entire testimony was fabricated. Dr. Turner, James said calmly, did National Power Industries pay you to destroy Mr. Cooper's reputation? The courtroom erupted. By the time James finished, the witness had admitted everything. But the attacks on James continued. News outlets began running stories about his past, twisting the truth. Disgraced attorney's checkered past, read one headline. They dug up every loss from his early career, questioned his competence, and used carefully coded language that played on racial stereotypes. James felt the weight of it all. He was 67 years old, working 20-hour days, sleeping little, eating less. His blood pressure was dangerously high. One evening, while reviewing documents, his vision blurred and his left arm went numb. Daniel found him slumped over the desk. "James, are you okay?" "Just tired," James said, trying to straighten up. "I'm fine." But he wasn't fine. Daniel called his doctor, who gave a stark warning. "Your blood pressure is through the roof. Another few days like this, and you're looking at a stroke or heart attack. You need rest." James accepted medication, but refused to slow down. There's too much at stake. Then came a breakthrough. Patricia discovered video footage of a secret meeting. Energy company executives, government officials, and prosecutors, all gathered in a private room, explicitly discussing how to eliminate the Cooper problem and make sure this technology never reaches the market. The video was damning. They discussed manufacturing evidence, bribing witnesses, and if legal means failed, more permanent solutions. They talked about James too. The janitor needs to be handled, and use his past to discredit him. James felt cold listening to their casual discussion of destroying lives. But now he had proof. Undeniable, video-recorded proof of the entire conspiracy. There was one more shocking revelation. Daniel's own brother, Thomas Cooper, appeared in the videos. He'd been working with the conspirators from the beginning, feeding them information, helping them build the case against his own brother. When Daniel learned of his brother's betrayal, he was devastated. Why? Why would Thomas do this? James had seen it before. Jealousy, resentment, money. Sometimes family wounds run deeper than we know. Thomas, sensing the walls closing in, reached out to James offering to testify against his co-conspirators in exchange for immunity. He provided them with even more evidence, recordings, documents, financial transfers showing the full scope of the conspiracy. Armed with this evidence, James returned to court. But the energy companies had hired a legendary attorney named William Thornton to take over the case. Thornton was famous for winning impossible cases and destroying opponents. Tall and imposing with silver hair, Thornton entered the courtroom like a general taking command. His first move was to attack James's credibility, using subtle racial undertones designed to trigger unconscious biases. Mr. Wilson, with all due respect to his unusual career path, lacks the expertise to properly evaluate complex technological evidence. His interpretations are colored by personal grievances against the very system that rightfully ended his legal career. James recognized the tactic immediately, the same kind of coded language he'd faced his entire life. But instead of getting angry, he responded with calm precision. "Mr. Thornton is using a technique I've encountered throughout my life," James said, speaking directly to the jury. "He's suggesting that because I'm a black man who has experienced injustice, somehow that makes me less credible, rather than more informed about how powerful people abuse the legal system." Several jury members nodded, making notes. Thornton's strategy had backfired. But the conspirators weren't done fighting. On the day James was scheduled to present the damning video evidence, armed men burst into the courtroom. Court security responded immediately, but in the chaos, Someone tried to grab the evidence from James's hands. James held on tight, shielding the flash drive with his body as Lauren screamed from the gallery. FBI agents who had been monitoring the case rushed in and took control. The fake agents were arrested, later identified as private military contractors hired by Midwest Energy Corporation. When order was finally restored, James stood before the court, his arm bandaged from the struggle, and said, "Your Honor, what we've just witnessed proves everything. They're willing to use violence in a court of law to prevent the truth from being heard." The judge, shaken by the attack, nodded. "Proceed, Mr. Wilson." And James played the video that would change everything. The courtroom fell absolutely silent as the video played. Energy company CEOs, their faces clear on the screen, discussing the Cooper problem. Government officials casually suggesting ways to neutralize Daniel's technology. Prosecutors coordinating with corporate lawyers to manufacture evidence. "We need to make sure this energy system never sees daylight," one executive said on the recording. "Whatever it takes." "The janitor is becoming a problem too," another voice added. "Use his history. Destroy his credibility." As the video ended, you could hear people breathing. The jury sat motionless, stunned by what they'd witnessed. James stood before them, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you've seen goes far beyond a simple business dispute. This is a conspiracy to suppress technology that could help millions of people, simply because it threatens powerful corporate profits." He gestured to Daniel. "Mr. Cooper created something beautiful, a way to provide free energy to families who struggle to pay their electric bills every month. Children could do their homework without their parents worrying about the cost. Elderly people wouldn't have to choose between heating their homes and buying medicine." James's voice grew stronger. "But powerful people decided that helping the poor was less important than protecting their billions. So they lied. They cheated. They threatened. They destroyed my home. They attacked us in this very courtroom." He paused, letting that sink in. "The question before you isn't whether Mr. Cooper's technology is revolutionary. They've already admitted that by trying so desperately to steal it. The question is whether justice still means something in this country. Whether ordinary people can still stand up to the powerful and win." For 2 hours, James presented the complete evidence. Financial records showing payoffs to witnesses. Documents proving the original charges were fabricated. Communications between conspirators. Thomas Cooper's testimony confirming everything. When James finished, even William Thornton, the legendary defense attorney, had no objections. The evidence was simply overwhelming. Judge Margaret Foster, who had initially dismissed James with such contempt, now looked shaken. Given the extraordinary evidence presented, this court dismisses all charges against Daniel Cooper with prejudice. "I am referring this matter to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution of all parties involved in this conspiracy." She looked directly at James, and for the first time, there was respect in her eyes. "Mr. Wilson, this court commends your extraordinary persistence in the face of overwhelming opposition and personal danger. You exemplify the highest ideals of our legal profession. I apologize for my initial treatment of you. You've taught this old judge an important lesson about prejudice and presumption." The courtroom erupted in applause. Daniel embraced James, both men with tears in their eyes. Lauren rushed forward and hugged her father tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Dad," she whispered. In the days and weeks that followed, the aftermath rippled across the nation. 29 executives from various energy companies and government officials were indicted on federal conspiracy charges. The conspiracy was front-page news for months. Several corporations faced bankruptcy as their stock prices collapsed. Midwest Energy Corporation, the company that had destroyed James's career 30 years ago, faced massive lawsuits from shareholders. Most importantly for James, the legal board examined his disbarment case from decades earlier and formally acknowledged it had been tainted by corporate influence and racial discrimination. His record was cleared. The stigma that had followed him for 30 years was finally lifted. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. James stood in his old apartment building, now being rebuilt after the fire, helping some of the other residents move back in. He was wearing his maintenance uniform again. Daniel arrived, confused. "James, what are you doing? You don't need to work as a janitor anymore. Come work for me. Chief Legal Officer, $5 million a year plus stock options. Name your price." James smiled and shook his head. "I appreciate that more than you know, Daniel. But I have other plans. He handed Daniel a business card, freshly printed. Wilson Law Practice, specializing in civil rights and discrimination cases. I'm reopening my practice, James explained. These past months reminded me why I became a lawyer in the first place. To fight for justice for people who can't fight for themselves. There are too many people out there facing the same discrimination I faced, without the resources to fight back. Daniel nodded slowly, understanding. Then let me help another way. I'm establishing a foundation, the Wilson Justice Fund, to support your work and similar cases nationwide. $20 million to start, with more every year. This time, James accepted. That would make a real difference. Thank you. Lauren joined her father's new practice as a partner. Their relationship, once strained, was now stronger than ever. They opened an office on the south side, not in a fancy downtown building, but in the neighborhood where James grew up, where the people who needed help could actually find them. Within weeks, they had dozens of clients. A factory worker facing discrimination. A teacher wrongly accused of misconduct. A family whose home was destroyed by a corporation's negligence. People who had been invisible to the legal system for too long. James made one unusual decision that puzzled everyone. He continued working part-time as a courthouse janitor. Why? Lauren asked. Dad, you don't need to anymore. James smiled. It keeps me humble. It reminds me that justice doesn't care about uniforms or titles. Some of my best insights come while mopping floors and listening to what people say when they think no one important is around. On the one-year anniversary of the trial's end, James received an unexpected letter. It was from Judge Foster, the woman who had initially treated him with such dismissive contempt. She wrote, Mr. Wilson, your case forced me to confront my own biases and assumptions. I am ashamed of how I initially treated you, making judgments based on your appearance and occupation rather than your character and ability. I have since become an advocate for judicial diversity training and eliminating unconscious bias in our court system. Thank you for the difficult lesson. You made me a better judge and a better person. James read the letter in his new office, Lauren working at the desk across from him. Outside the window, he could see the neighborhood where he grew up. Still struggling, still fighting, but now with someone fighting for them. A young man entered the office, nervously clutching his hat. He wore a janitor's uniform from a corporate office building. Are you Mr. Wilson? He asked quietly. I heard you help people like me. My boss has been treating me differently because of my race, and I have evidence, but no one will listen to a janitor. James stood and extended his hand warmly. Everyone deserves justice, regardless of their job title or the color of their skin. Sit down and tell me your story. As the young man began to speak, James caught Lauren's eye across the room. She was smiling, proud of her father and the legacy he was building. James thought back to that moment in the courtroom when he'd stood up and said, I will defend him. 3 simple words that had changed everything. He'd been invisible for so long. Just a janitor mopping floors, ignored and dismissed by people who thought themselves important. But he'd learned something powerful. Heroes don't always wear expensive suits. Justice doesn't care about your title or your bank account. And sometimes the most unlikely person in the room is exactly the one who can change the world. That evening, James returned to the courthouse for his shift. He put on his navy blue uniform, picked up his mop, and began cleaning courtroom 405, the same courtroom where it all began. A young lawyer walked past without acknowledging him, too focused on her phone to notice the janitor. James smiled to himself. He knew something she didn't yet. That true power doesn't come from a fancy degree or a prestigious job. It comes from standing up for what's right, even when it costs you everything. Especially then. As James mopped the floor where he'd once stood defending an innocent man, he thought about all the people whose lives had changed because he'd found the courage to speak up. Daniel's clean energy technology was now spreading to poor communities across the country, providing free electricity to families who had struggled for so long. The conspiracy had been exposed, preventing future abuses. His daughter had found her purpose, and his own name had been cleared. But most importantly, people who had felt invisible and powerless now knew that someone was fighting for them. That justice was possible, even against overwhelming odds. James Wilson had been knocked down by life. He'd lost his career, his reputation, his home. He'd spent nearly 3 decades being invisible, overlooked, dismissed. But he'd gotten back up. And in doing so, he'd reminded the world of a simple truth. One person standing up for justice can change everything. As James finished cleaning and prepared to lock up the courtroom, He paused at the defense table where he'd sat during those difficult weeks. He placed his hand on the wood, remembering. Then he turned off the lights and walked out into the Chicago night, a humble janitor who had become a hero, not through wealth or fame or power, but through the simple act of doing what was right. And that, my friends, is what real courage looks like. The end. Thank you for taking this journey with me. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, you don't need a title or a position to stand up for justice. You just need courage and the willingness to do what's right, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard.